This is the second time I've spoken to a lovely man, and I've found that he has such a great career. But there's one movie that always sticks on my mind. It's called Traces of Red, and it's the first script that he sold, and it's Mr. Jim Piddock. Hello again, mate.
How are you? It was actually the first solo script I sold. I sold one thing before that, which was a joint script I wrote with someone else. But this was my first solo script, which I sold to the Sam Goldwyn Company. It was my first foray into how to be smart in business, because they wanted to option it for $50,000 and pay me, I think, $200,000 for the script if it got made, which is not a bad deal for a starting, for a new writer starting out. And I said, here's the deal. Why don't we do this? Why don't you option it for $15,000?
Okay.
And if it gets made, you pay me $350,000. And they were so shocked by a writer asking for less money up front.
Yeah.
That they went for it. And of course, the film got made, so I ended up far better off. But that was my first lesson in play the long game.
There's a lot of typewriters like featured in the film. Did you write the script on a typewriter?
I did not, I don't think. I'm trying to remember. When was it? It was 19. No, I think it was early computer days,
Yeah. Okay. And when it came to the casting, did you have much of a say? Definitely around this time, I could have seen Bruce Willis in that lead role.
Yeah, you know who it was supposed to be? It was supposed to be Dennis Quaid.
Okay.
Dennis Quaid was sort of all set to do it, and then something else. He had a clash, and they wanted to make it right away. So they said, well, we're not going to wait, which is a shame. I like Jim Belushi, but Dennis Quaid would have been better. Simple as that. I'm going to be honest with you. That's the way I roll. So that, and then Lorraine Bracco as a Palm Beach socialite was odd casting, but she's a good actress, and she sort of made it work. It wasn't typical. And Tony Goldwyn was very good. And the supporting cast was generally outstanding. I mean, I think Jim's just a very specific actor, and he, he did a sterling job, but it was not the steamy film noir that it should have been because of that.
I still think it holds up. I mean, I'll talk a bit more about what I think the support casts were like, but Jim was okay. I mean, he looked the part.
No, absolutely. He wasn't bad, but it was a much more steamy, moody film noir, and Jim is not going to give you sexy. I'm sorry, but he's not. Whereas Dennis Quaid, certainly in those days, did, and Lorraine Bracco did actually. Lorraine did to a degree. So we lost a little bit about that. I mean, where it holds up as a mystery. It holds up absolutely as a mystery.
Yeah.
And a sort of film noir, but just not so steamy. You know who liked that film, which surprised me because it got sort of okay reviews and didn't do great business. Howard Stern really liked that film.
Yeah. I'm not surprised he liked it. That's good. Speaking, I don't want to go I'm going all over the place here, but I'll stick with the cast for a second because I do want to talk about a couple of critics when it featured on Siskel and Ebert.
Yeah.
Lorraine Bracco, I thought, she might be a little bit miscast, but her role she was really good. Her performance and the costumes she wore helped complement her role, especially a gold dress that she wore. It was like a honeycomb color.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's so good that she pulled it off. It just became something different. So I agree with you. Yeah, I'm trying to remember all the wardrobe stuff.
Faye Grant, she had good costumes too.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean that film was 33 years ago.
1992 it was released, so I'm sure.
So we made it in 91. Then. We must have made it in 91. So it was 31 years ago.
Well, here's my VHS copy.
Oh, wow. There you go.
I don't have it on DVD because I don't think it's ever been released on DVD in Australia anyway.
Oh, I think it might have. I think it might have somewhere. So, wow, there it is.
That's what I watch at least once a year.
Jim looks like he's doing a vampire thing there.
Well, actually, I was going to ask you about the cover. most of the images of the poster are similar to this. Were there any alternatives that you can think of?
I don't think so. I can't remember. You know, the original title was Beyond Suspicion.
No, I didn't know. Okay.
Yeah, and then I think another film came out around that time, a small film, or a TV series. I can't remember. So they decided to change the title, but I rather liked Beyond Suspicion.
Yeah, there was one with Liam Neeson called Above Suspicion back in around this time. So, and there was all those 90s thrillers that were, well, this was part of the mix. So I do think that the saxophone on the soundtrack may have been a little bit overdone. Graham Revell's soundtrack is good, but I think the saxophone in this was really pushing it at times in scenes. That's my only negative.
Totally agree. I didn't love the soundtrack, but that's my opinion again.
Graham Revell's a good, obviously a
good composer. Very good.
Tell me a little bit about the plot, the lipstick killer and the Nightwing perfume and that. How did you come up with all that?
I can't remember. I mean, I'm reading. When I was a teenager, I read most of Agatha Christie. Yeah. So I loved thrillers, and obviously my career up till then had been very much known in comedy, and for quite a long while afterwards. So it was odd for me to sort of sell something in this genre. But I love the machinations of whodunits, and I'm reading actually gone back to Agatha Christie this last month, and I've been reading a lot of the plays and the books. And what she does so well is set up a group of people, and you know, and there are current films that do it so well. I mean, The Glass Onion I thought was terrific, really entertaining.
Did you? Okay.
Knives Out, you know, Glass, and they do the same thing. And so I like the idea of setting up, you know, and obviously the beginning is totally a parody of Sunset Boulevard. You know, it's completely, you know,
of course,
the dead person narrating it, saying this is how I ended up. And that was what it was supposed to be. And there was a theme, and I think it kind of went out the window at some point. Though there was loads of in-film references in the script. It was all this, it was kind of almost an homage to film noir. And I loved the idea of setting up this group of characters and just completely red herrings everywhere. And you didn't know who it could be. And everybody, you know, Beyond Suspicion was kind of like out suspicioning everything. Everybody was under suspicion. And it was beyond anything you'd sort of seen before. And in fact, I actually changed in the middle of writing it. I think either in the second draft or during the first draft, I actually changed who the killer was, which I thought, wow, that's weird. And then I found Agatha Christie did the same thing many times.
Yeah, right. When you say you changed it,
not that I compare myself with her.
Well, you can say that in the same sentence, Jim Piddock, Agatha Christie, but maybe just a different, you know, way of saying it. You're not comparing yourself.
Yeah, l'hommage or the ripoff. Yeah, she was extraordinary.
Are you changing it, like the killer though? Did it happen during the filming as well? Did things change?
No. By the time we got there, it had long since been established who was the killer. Yeah, and the backstory kind of, I can't maybe massage that. Yeah.
Okay, so no alternate endings or different characters had, you know, backstories or anything?
No, not by then. Not by the time we got to shoot it.
Okay. Speaking of shooting, there was a few familiar locations. Like I've seen, I just have this feeling I've seen some of these locations in movies before, especially Lorraine Bracco's house, but I could be wrong. Whereabouts did you shoot it?
It was Palm Beach, Miami, Palm Beach, I think Fort Lauderdale, we shot some stuff. It was all in that Florida area. Again, originally it was all set in LA, and then it was changed to Florida.
Yeah.
But yeah, there may well have been locations that were used, you know. I think that's the only film I've ever shot in Florida. I've shot TV, shot stuff there, but no new film.
Did you get a sponsorship from any beauty companies or lipstick companies after the film?
I don't know if they did. Well, they would have done it before, you know, it would have been product placement.
True.
I can't remember, to be honest. I have no idea.
You're in a cameo scene with Jim.
Yep.
and Jim Belushi, Jim and Jim. Now you're wearing this like a dressing gown style of shave coat as you walk down the steps. It's undone. Was that your own? Was it wardrobe?
Yeah,
Were you meant to look like that?
I think it was wardrobe. Actually, my scene, I think my scene was with Tony Goldwyn, not with Jim.
It was too. It wasn't with Jim. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it was with Tony. I named my character after the goalkeeper of my soccer team, my football team in England, Nigel Martin. So my character is called Mr. Nigel Martin. And I don't think I'd ever played a gay character before. And now I wouldn't be allowed to, because being a heterosexual, you're not allowed to do that. So I took liberties that I wouldn't be allowed to take now, probably. But I enjoyed just playing this kind of rather theatrical guy who you just didn't trust from the minute he walked on screen. There was something off about him. And I kind of enjoyed that. I think I had one or two scenes, I can't remember. But it was one of those things where I wrote what I wanted to write. And then this has happened so many times through my career. When it came to casting it, I'd go, well, what am I going to play? And you see, oh, there's only that role left, or there's only that that I'm right for. So I ended up playing Mr. Martin. Yeah.
Yeah, you I don't know how I made the Freudian slip of you being with Jim Belushi. It was Tony Goldwyn, but you didn't really trust him at that point either. And then when you met you, it was double trouble, because she didn't know if you were the, responsible or what. So it was a great scene, nice little scene, and it looked like it was filmed on a real location in a real place. Yeah,
it was. Yeah.
Did you ever visit the set often, or?
Yeah, I was there. I was there the whole time, I think.
Right.
I don't remember, because I think I was a producer on it as well. So I was around pretty much the entire time. Yeah.
The director Andy, how did he come about, like, directing? Did you know him previously, Andy?
That was the Goldwyn Company. He directed something for HBO, a film that Criminal Minds. That's a TV series. Criminal Justice.
Yeah.
And he was obviously a smart kind of guy who knew how to do those sort of procedural mystery stuff. So so that's why Andy came into the mix. Yeah, but the Goldwyn Company were very aware of him at the time.
Have you thought about extending the universe, or having some kind of sequel, or maybe bring the characters back in another form ever?
I haven't. No, I mean, I don't know if I've even written another kind of film in that exact genre. I went on to write all sorts of different things after that. I think if the film had done, really well, then you start thinking about, where can you go from here? Is there a series? Is there this? But I think it felt like it was a one-off to me, and I never want to outstay my welcome, and I moved on to a lot of other different things and things that were important for me to write. And I've liked doing that. I've never been pigeonholed either as a writer or an actor. So, I've actually just got back into the idea of mysteries and thrillers, but particularly mysteries. And I want to find something that really excites me in that field.
Well, if you do, and you write another script or screenplay, maybe you can put like a few homages to Traces of Red.
It'll be, yes, I'll put obscure homage to Traces of Red, and I'll write myself a better part.
There's a scene in the film where they're at a nightclub called the Squeeze nightclub. And it's like very fluoro and very 80s, even though it was filmed in the 90s. Do you remember that set at all?
I don't even remember the scene. Sorry to be.
That's all right. Like, I know it a little bit better maybe than some people, because I watch it on a regular basis.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. To be perfectly frank with you, I don't watch a lot of stuff that I make.
Sure.
I certainly, as an actor, I just occasionally will see stuff or pick something out for a reel, and things I've written I usually watch, because I'm in the editing process. But by the time it's released, you've sort of seen it so many times.
Of course, yeah.
You just want to let it go and let it be in the universe.
Yeah.
There are certain things I would have loved to have come back to, and to, as you say, to do a sequel or a spin-off or whatever. But that one, I haven't seen Traces of Red for years and years and years, at least 25 years. So your memory, you know the film, I'm sure, a million times better than me. I can sort of tell you how it came about and how the genesis of it.
Yeah, of course.
Your memory of the details of it is going to be far better than mine.
Oh, well, it's still of higher interest to me, and you're giving me the time to tell me what you do remember. I do appreciate. It was featured on Siskel and Egg Bebert's show, which didn't actually show in Australia, but obviously I've watched lots of clips. And the other movies that they reviewed that night, they reviewed Traces of Red, were Flirting, which is an Australian film. Nicole Kidman, Naomi Watts was in that, Tandy Newton. They also, Passenger 57, spoke about that film. Jennifer 8 and The Lover, The Lover with Jane March, who incidentally was in Colour of Night with Bruce Willis as well. So interesting combination there. Jennifer
8 was directed by Bruce Robinson.
Yeah, and Uma Thurman, of course, Andy Garcia from memory.
Yeah,
John Malkovich. So great company to be in on that particular episode.
Yeah, did they hate it? I can't remember. They probably did.
You might have to check it out. They were a little bit indifferent on it, but like they are mostly with most films, I guess.
It didn't get terrible reviews, actually. It got sort of like, average. It just didn't make the splash that it should have. And it didn't do the box office that they want. I mean, it did fine, but it didn't. It just was one of those films that didn't quite explode.
It made its way to limited cinema screens in Australia. I think I mentioned that to you the first time we talked. Is where I first saw it, but then it came out on VHS and done big business. So yeah, that's where it found a life.
Yes, I think you're right. I think it did, and I probably should have seen more residuals from that.
Do you have your original drafts or any storyboards or anything from the film? Any memorabilia?
Probably do, right? Just behind me. I probably got the original draft of it. Yeah. I'll sell it to you for a vast sum of money.
One day, if we ever catch up, maybe I can have a quick look at it. You never know, right?
No, I'm sure I do somewhere. Yeah, and I probably got on my computer an early draft of it.
I'll move on to a cameo that you also made in a movie called Lethal Weapon 2. Maybe a few more people saw that one.
Yeah.
In a very in particular scene that it was a bit of arguing, a bit of a commotion was happening. How long did it take to shoot? You were with Joe Pesci and Danny Glover in the scene. You're in an office and you're playing a South African. Tell me about that.
It's interesting that you picked these two films because that was the first ever film I was in.
That's your debut. All right.
Yeah, and that was 1989, I think. It was a couple of years before. So yeah, that was my first ever film. I'd done TV and I'd done a lot of theatre, but that was my first film. And I actually was hired for 3 days to shoot that scene, which shows you what kind of budget they had to, because it was a scene that in a TV show you'd shoot in about half a day.
Probably.
So it was 3 days, but Joe Pesci got flu or something, or he was sick. And so I kept being held on, and I ended up, I think, being employed for about 7 days. So it was kind of one of those nice first jobs where you get paid more than you should have.
I bet.
And then the great thing about that was that I had that line in the movie, when he's Danny Glover wants to emigrate to South Africa. And I said, but you can't, I'm the South African envoy. And then, he says, well, why not? And I said, because you're black. And that Joe Pesci, it made him laugh so much that he kept repeating it. He said, you are black, you are. And then afterwards, in other scenes, he would repeat it.
That's right.
So it became a kind of catchphrase for the movie, which was pretty remarkable to my first movie to be the #1 movie of that year, to have one scene in it. And for that scene to be so memorable that became one of the catchphrases of the movie, if not the catchphrase. I think the other catchphrase was just revoked, diplomatic immunity just revoked.
Yeah.
Which is Danny Glover's line, which was a great line. And to this day, I still have people say to me, because you're black.
Is that right? So people honestly remember your first role. How
oh my God,
that?
Absolutely. And often as not, they are themselves black. I mean, I've met people I would never have anything in common with, like young rappers. I'd meet somewhere, I don't know, someone would introduce me at a party or somewhere, and
Yeah.
you'd be on a film set and you're going, oh, okay, how am I going to relate to this person? And they'll just waltz up to you and go, but you're black. They remembered it, and they know that, which is remarkable because they would have been children when that came out, probably,
Yeah.
or not even born. And I am here, you know, 30 years older than them, or whatever, 30 or 40 years older than them, and they remember it.
Well, the legacy of those movies live on, and I guess there's always people who reference Lethal Weapon films, and just so happens that what you're seeing is one that stuck in people's mind.
Yeah, I think it's a good scene. It still works, and it's probably the best. I mean, Lethal Weapon, the first one was very good, but I think Lethal Weapon 2 in many ways was probably the most successful.
Yeah, I would say so. It's the one that it was more serious than the first one and the second one, and then it sort of got into a bit of comic book area. But I think 3 was underrated. I actually really liked number 3.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Dick Donner was a really great director, and
Yeah,
he
what
knew
was
how
he
to
like
handle
to
it.
work with?
Oh, what lovely! And I knew him a bit socially. I got to
Yeah.
know him afterwards socially, and he was just. I saw his widow not long ago, and I said to her, he was the manliest man I've ever met.
Okay.
And I said, when I first met him, I wanted to be him when I grew up, because he was just in a perfectly non-toxic way, the most masculine man I've ever met, but in a completely non-toxic way and a non-offensive way. I really, really liked him and respected him, and he was kind of a very relaxed director. He made you feel comfortable, but he always knew what he was doing. I liked him very much, and I think, you know, it's very sad that he's no longer with us.
Was it hard to do this South African accent, or are you great at accents?
No, I've done it a couple of times. I did it in a series called Family Tree for HBO, which was the other time. Not really. I mean, there's always people that, you know, I've seen on YouTube, that clip is on YouTube, being on YouTube, and there's always people that go, oh God, that's the worst South African accent I've ever heard.
Okay.
And you go, okay, good for them. Who are they? Where are they from? And it's some, you know, some twat from Texas who's never heard of it. And, you know, you just go, oh, there's always somebody knows. There's always somebody who thinks they know better. It's a perfectly good South African accent. You know, it's ludicrous. And one of the things I can do is I can do accents. So if you haul me up on a Texas accent and you're from Texas, or, you know, a Canadian accent and you're from Canada, absolutely have at it. You deserve everything you got. But don't, you know, none of the people that criticize the accent were South African. That's what, and then of course everybody else, you know, accepts it. There's always somebody, though. There's always a handful of complete arseholes who think they know better.
Well, I haven't heard you do an Australian accent, but I'll be sure to let you know what I think. But
well, it goes backwards and forwards between Australia and New Zealand. I used to do, when I worked with Jackie Weaver, I used to do it all the time. It always comes out sort of like Dame Edna, you know, or Barry Humphries. It's always that kind of thing, you know. Hello, mate. How you doing? It's very kind of Barry Humphries. That's my model.
How do I sound? Do I sound very Australian? I try and keep my voice professional.
You sound like a.
That's good.
No, it's not strong. It's like Clint, our friend Clint. It's not strong.
Cool.
But if you asked me to differentiate between New Zealand and Australia, I probably could if I spent the time. But my accent probably veers backwards and forwards between islands. You know.
Well, we claim Russell Crowe and Sam Neill as our own. You know, they were born in New Zealand, so
yeah, exactly.
They're interchangeable, right? Almost.
Exactly.
Now, I have to mention your book. I'd like to mention your book again. Last time we spoke, we were talking a lot about your book, and it's still out there to buy. How are the sales been? You might not be all over it, but are you happy with the response? Because there's been a bit of time in between since its release. Are you getting a read? You know, how do you feel? And tell me a little bit where people can buy it if they haven't got it yet.
Well, the best place is Amazon. It's always, it's the quickest and easiest, and it's in four formats: hardcover, paperback, audiobook, or ebook. And the audiobook seems to be very popular. So I've heard it referred to by a number of people as a bestseller. I don't know what that means. I think you can, that covers a multitude of things.
It does, right?
So I know that in the first month, it was a bestseller in certain categories, and it did extremely well. How it's done since, I'm not certain, because I don't check the numbers. All the proceeds, as you probably know, go to charity.
Yes,
so
which is fantastic.
I get sent money, and then I send it on to the charities. So the fact that most authors don't see any royalties, but I didn't take any upfront fee, so I didn't take an advance. I didn't take an advance, so that everything could go to the charities. So that's nice to know, and that must be selling on a level. I mean, I think all books, unless you're up in the top 1%, or Michelle Obama or whatever, or Harry, Prince Harry. But my book's a lot funnier than Prince Harry's, and it's actually more controversial.
It's about your life, right? And through the Hollywood system and the stories and the people you met, for people who are uninitiated.
Absolutely. It's much funnier than Harry's book, and it should have sold as much. And there's less ginger in it. So I would go out and buy my book rather than Harry's. You'll enjoy it more. But yeah, no, I think it's doing fine. It's one of those things that it's not going to date, I don't think, because I wrote it specifically not to be a book that would necessarily date.
Right.
It could probably be updated now and again, with if I do a lot more stuff. But it has a feel about it that's I think hopefully not too timeless, because it isn't just about my life. It's about my observations of life.
Yeah. Yeah. Which speaking to you twice now, I know you've got a great memory and you have some really good stories. So thanks again, Jim. What can you tell me? What have you got coming up? Anything that you can plug? Any films, television appearances?
I have a film that I shot a while ago called The Queen Mary, in which I play the captain of the Queen Mary, which is a supernatural thriller. And that, I think, is coming out this year. I'm not sure when. I have a film that I wrote and will be in, and I'm producing, called Frankel, about the famous British horse, starring Jeremy Irons and Minnie Driver, which is supposed to start shooting in the next few months.
Oh, I love Jeremy Irons. That's a great casting choice.
He'll be great playing Sir Henry Cecil, who is a real trainer and one of the best English trainers, racehorse trainers. And I've just finished writing a novel, which, having finished that book, I said I'll never write another book because it's way too much work and too little reward. And then I, of course, then spent the last 2 months writing my first novel, which I wrote very, very quickly. So I've done that. And what else? Got a TV show, a TV series in England I'm developing. So yeah, there's stuff. There's always stuff going on. It's just a question of what gets made when.
Yeah. Well, let's hope Traces of Red, the next generation might be an eventual thing, right?
Traces of Blue, I think, comes next.
And being the captain of the Queen Mary, did you know your starboard from your port, from your bow?
I did by the end. I knew my ass from my elbow as well. Yes, I did by the end. There was a lot of beard acting. It was set in all my stuff was set in the 1930s. It was great. I get to do John Wayne stuff. I get to wield a gun and I start as it's great because I do the whole gamut. I'm a good guy. You're not sure if he's a bad guy, bad guy, and then good. It's like a character that goes amazing arc, and I get to do all sorts of cool things that I never normally get to do. Shooting people and killing people and stuff, which is fantastic.
The Oscars are coming up soon. You've attended the Oscars in the past, haven't you? I know Best in Show.
Never been to the Oscars. Never been invited. Never been asked. I've never been nominated. And it's show business is lost. Is my feeling. Right. Show business is lost because clearly, there are I mean, you could find half a dozen performances which should have won Academy Awards.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm happy to toil away outside the limelight. And, you know, maybe like Van Gogh, after my death, people will go, we'll give him a posthumous Academy Award just for hanging in there. Because God knows he tried. No, I have not. I'm not a big awards. I mean, I've won a few awards over the years, mostly comedy awards, but I'm not a big awards person. I don't like the arts being competitive. I mean, it's competitive enough to be in it, the first place, but I don't like turning it into a sport. I don't watch awards shows. I used to watch them when I was younger. I used to do sweepstakes and win every single one because I would never vote for the films I liked. I always knew what people would pick.
Sure.
And I would do that. That was the only reason I ever watched them, was just because I'd clean up at the end, and I'd invite people to these parties and everyone would put in $20 and people would think it was rigged because I was throwing the party, and I'd always win. And I'd clean them out and it would pay for all the pizzas and all the booze. And I did it every year. I don't watch them. It's become out of control. It's a whole business. By the time it gets to the awards, I couldn't tell you any year what won, because you're so saturated with all the nominations and the this and the that.
Sure, yeah.
And then you never remember who won, and you don't care. And I do vote in various award stuff, and I have to watch tons and tons of movies, and each year it gets progressively worse.
Yeah,
it's progressively worse, and there's no vetting, so everybody throws their film into the ring. So you end up with 250 films you're supposed to watch, which you of course can't do. And then you get to the point where you're just watching stuff, and you're going, after 25 minutes, you're going, I'm not watching this anymore. It's not grabbed me. I will say that this year there's a film that wasn't nominated at all that was, to me, the most obvious Oscar winner, and it wasn't even nominated. So it's ludicrous. And the film that's the front runner, I couldn't watch. I literally couldn't watch it. I watched half an hour, tried to watch it twice, and I've ended up watching about 2/3 of it in all. And I still think it's totally the Emperor's New Clothes. There are two films to me that were outstanding Oscar type films. One of them did get nominated in the foreign film category. But the other one, I don't think got any nominations, maybe a song or something.
Are you willing to tell me the one that you tried to watch twice? I mean, I think you're talking about The Fabelmans. No,
I haven't watched that. Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's
sure, yeah.
It's and it's maybe an unpopular view, but I found it attention deficit disorder filmmaking with a very silly take on the premise of The Matrix. And I thought Michelle Yeoh was very, very good. She grounded it and made it kind of, at the beginning particularly watchable. But I just thought I like my comedy dry, and I like people to be funny without saying, "Hey, look at me, I'm so funny." I found the performances grotesquely broad. I found the premise ridiculous, and there was loads of fights, endless fights for the dum-dums. And I felt like it sort of hit enough politically correct things to please the liberals in Hollywood. It just didn't, of which I'm one, but I just didn't get it, and I don't mind admitting it. I mean,
you're not the only one.
I don't like trashing other people's work because it's so hard to make a film. What I will say about it, it was extraordinarily inventive and visually exciting. Yeah. And when I read that they shot it in, I think, 24 days, it's a remarkable achievement. Remarkable. That said, it's not a film for me.
There's a Richard Donner link, of course, because Ke Huy Quan is in Everything Everywhere All at Once, and he was in The Goonies, directed by Richard Donner.
Wow. Yeah.
There you go. There's a link to everything in Hollywood, just about, right?
There is a link. Yeah. There is a link.
And it's my business to know it, so I won't hold you up any longer. That's the movie we were talking about, and it might not have won any awards, but in my heart, I think it's one of the great 90s thrillers, and there was a whole bunch of them that came out around that time. Jim, I appreciate your time, mate, and maybe we'll talk again. I haven't even mentioned Nicholas Guest, so
or Christopher Guest.
Oh, Christopher Guest. Yeah, of course. Who's Nick? Sorry, man.
Nick Guest is his brother, who I do know, who's a voiceover actor. Yeah, anyway, it was lovely to talk to you, and I appreciate your appreciation of my first ever screenplay.